I was editing our latest cooking video, but nothing out of the ordinary. I had gotten used to the rhythm of it, the chopping sounds, the sizzle of a hot pan. Laura's laugh in the background as she explained some trick or secret ingredient to our followers. She always had that charm on camera, the kind that made viewers think they knew her personally. That's what made our blog successful. People loved us, or, more accurately, they loved her. It was during one of those seemingly harmless moments, while I was scrolling through the footage that Josh, our photographer, had sent me, that I saw it. At first, I didn't think much of it, a quick glance, a laugh shared a little too close, but then it happened. Behind the scenes, just outside the focus of the camera, Laura and Josh kissed. It wasn't long, but it was unmistakable. The way her hand rested on his shoulder, how they seemed completely oblivious to the world around them. It all hit me in a way that I can only describe as numbing. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, unable to process what I had just seen. My first instinct was to think I had imagined it, that maybe I was just exhausted from hours of editing. But no, I rewound the footage. There it was again, clear as day. Laura, my wife, was kissing another man. And not just any man, Josh, the guy we trusted to help us build our blog, the one who had spent countless hours with us behind the camera. It felt like someone had thrown a punch right into my gut. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How long had this been going on? Was it just a one-time thing, or was there more? I thought about all the late-night meetings Laura had with Josh, and all the times she said they were working on something for the blog. I believed her. I had no reason not to. Until now. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand answers, but something inside me told me to wait. I wasn't the type to explode. I preferred to think things through. And this wasn't something I could just shout my way out of. If Laura had betrayed me, I needed to make sure she felt the same pain I was feeling right now. But it couldn't be loud, it couldn't be messy. It had to be slow, subtle, devastating. An idea began to form. I wouldn't destroy our relationship in private. I would let her do it herself, right in front of our followers, the same people who adored her. If she was going to cheat, she'd do it on camera, for everyone to see. I smiled to myself. This was going to take patience, but it was the perfect way to make sure she felt the fallout from her betrayal. Our blog has given her fame, attention, and admiration. Soon enough, it would be the very thing that brought her down. After that night, nothing felt the same. Laura's laugh, once sweet and familiar, now felt forced, like an act she played for the camera and me. She carried on with our blog as if nothing had changed, but I couldn't unsee what I had witnessed. Every time she mentioned another meeting with Josh, my stomach turned, but I smiled and nodded, pretending I believed her. It was almost too easy for her to lie. I started paying more attention to her schedule. Laura wasn't hiding her time with Josh, which made it easier for me to track everything. When she left for work, I'd check her phone when she wasn't looking. The messages between her and Josh were subtle, nothing too incriminating, at least, not on the surface. They didn't outright talk about their affair, but there were hints. Short, cryptic texts that meant more than they said, "Let's meet early," or "Had a great time last night." I wanted more proof, but I wasn't in a rush. This wasn't about catching her red-handed, it was about making sure her own actions led to her downfall. I began going through old footage that Josh had taken. Hours and hours of content mostly focused on cooking demos, kitchen shots, and our daily routines for the blog. But then there were the behind-the-scenes moments. Little slices of time when Josh had kept the camera rolling, even after we thought he'd stopped. And in those moments, I started to see a pattern. Laura and Josh always seemed to find themselves alone in the corners of the set. At first, it was just casual chatting, but as the videos progressed, their body language changed, closer, more intimate. They thought they were out of view, but the camera always caught more than they realized. A touch here, a shared look there, and then, that kiss. I started saving those clips and cataloging them in a folder on my computer. Each time I added another video, it felt like I was storing ammunition. I was waiting for the perfect moment to unleash it all. But that time wasn't yet. I had to make sure my plan was flawless. If I rushed it, she might slip away with just an apology, and I wasn't going to give her that easy escape. No, when this came crashing down, it would destroy everything she valued, just as she had destroyed my trust. Weeks passed, and Laura remained clueless. She was busy planning new content for the blog, talking about recipes and upcoming collaborations. The audience loved her energy, and sponsors kept lining up, eager to be part of our brand. Meanwhile, I had already started weaving my trap. The first step was subtle. I began editing the videos a bit differently. At first, I didn't include any damning footage, just little moments where Laura and Josh seemed too comfortable. Maybe it wasn't enough to draw suspicion right away, but it was enough to plant a seed. In one video, I let a shot linger on the two of them laughing together off camera. In another, I made sure a few seconds of their close conversation remained, while I pretended it was just part of the setup for the shoot. Viewers started noticing. The comments trickled in slowly at first. Does anyone else think Laura and Josh seem really close? Is it just me, or is there something going on between them? At first, I ignored the comments publicly, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. People were starting to notice. That was the goal, to let Laura's own actions raise suspicion. She had no idea, of course. She kept doing what she always did, acting like the perfect business partner and wife while sneaking around with Josh. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. In our latest video, a simple recipe tutorial, I inserted a short clip, just a few seconds. It was from one of the behind-the-scenes moments where Laura and Josh were in the kitchen, unaware of the camera still rolling. This time, they weren't just talking. Josh leaned in and kissed her, and for those few seconds, they were lost in each other. I made sure the kiss wasn't obvious right away. It was hidden in the corner of the frame, almost out of focus, but not quite. Only the most attentive viewers would catch it at first, but once they did, it would spread like wildfire. And it did. The comments exploded. People were sharing timestamps, pointing out the kiss, dissecting every frame. It was all anyone could talk about. What is going on here? Did anyone else see that kiss? It's at 8:45. Someone explain. This can't be real. Is this part of the video? A joke? The more people questioned it, the more curious they became. The blog's view count surged. Everyone wanted to see for themselves. Laura thought the spike in traffic was thanks to her brilliant content. She had no idea that what was really drawing attention was the beginning of her public downfall. The kiss was out there, and the internet did what it always does, it blew up. Within a day, the video had tripled its usual views. Comments were flooding in, not about the recipe or our cooking tips, but about that one stolen moment between Laura and Josh. Everyone had an opinion. Is this staged? Did anyone else see the way they looked at each other? Josh and Laura? No way. But, maybe? At first, Laura didn't notice. She was thrilled by the sudden surge in engagement, thinking it was because people loved her new recipe. She was riding high, talking excitedly about upcoming collaborations and how we should capitalize on the traffic boost. Meanwhile, I kept quiet, letting the chaos build. The beauty of it was that it didn't even seem like I was involved. It looked like a natural mistake, a behind-the-scenes accident caught on camera. Then, the questions started coming from sponsors. Hey, we saw some chatter about the latest video. Everything all right? Just checking in. Looks like there's a lot of speculation about Laura and Josh. I knew the sponsors wouldn't pull out right away. At this point, it was just gossip. But I could tell Laura was starting to feel the heat. She sat down with me one night, her phone buzzing with notifications from our followers, and her face clouded with concern. Mike, have you seen the comments? She asked, scrolling through the flood of reactions. People are saying crazy things about me and Josh. They think something's going on. I shrugged, feigning ignorance. Probably just fans reading into things. You know how they can be. She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. This wasn't something she could easily brush off. The kiss had been subtle, but undeniable. Her followers weren't stupid, and they were relentless. That night, I watched her more closely than ever. She stayed up late, messaging Josh, trying to figure out how to manage the situation. It was almost laughable. They didn't even realize the full extent of the damage yet. They thought they could control the narrative, and make it all go away with a few strategic posts or distractions. But they had no idea what I had in store. The next few days were like watching a slow-motion train wreck. Laura tried to keep up her usual routine, posting on our blog and social media, smiling through cooking tutorials, and pretending nothing was wrong. But I could tell she was unraveling. She was glued to her phone, trying to manage the growing scandal. Meanwhile, I was one step ahead. I had more footage, plenty of it. Each clip I'd gathered showed just a little bit more of Laura and Josh's private moments. Their interactions were increasingly intimate, and while none of it was graphic, The implications were clear. The next video I uploaded took things a step further. This time, I didn't just hint at their relationship. I made it obvious enough that no one could deny it. In one of the casual kitchen shots, I inserted a clip of Laura laughing with Josh, her hand resting lightly on his arm, their faces way too close for comfort. It wasn't just an innocent moment anymore, it screamed infidelity to anyone who was paying attention. And, of course, people were paying attention. The backlash was immediate. Comments poured in faster than ever. "This is gross. I've been following them for years, and now this? Unsubscribing. Can't believe Laura would do this. Where's Mike? He needs to know what's happening." Laura saw it all. This time, she couldn't ignore it. We were sitting in the living room when her phone buzzed, and I could see the panic set in as she scrolled through the flood of negative comments. "Mike, this is getting out of control," she said, her voice shaky. "People are talking about us. Me and Josh. They think I'm cheating on you." I looked at her, keeping my expression as neutral as possible. "Are you?" Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. That was enough for me. "I didn't think so," I said quietly, turning back to my laptop, pretending to be focused on editing the next video. Laura was visibly shaken, but still, she didn't fully grasp how deep in trouble she was. She called Josh that night. Their hushed conversation carrying through the walls. They talked about damage control, about how they could spin the situation to make it look like fans had blown things out of proportion. But I knew the truth. The more they tried to explain it away, the worse it would get. And it did. By the end of the week, more of our sponsors had started to back out. They didn't want to be associated with drama or scandal. The comments were brutal. Our followers, once loyal and adoring, turned on Laura. They saw her as the cheater, the liar, the one who had ruined everything. And the worst part? I wasn't even doing anything at this point. I just sat back and let the storm take her down. Laura was losing everything she had worked for. The perfect image she had cultivated over the years was shattering in front of her, and there was no way to put the pieces back together. But I wasn't done yet. The next video would be the final blow. It was time. I had watched Laura spiral for weeks. The scandal had taken on a life of its own, and every attempt she made to contain it only fanned the flames. The blog, once our pride and joy, was now a battlefield of gossip, speculation, and hate. The sponsors were pulling out one by one, and our follower count was in freefall. Every day, I watched her grow more frantic, more desperate. She tried to keep smiling for the camera, but behind the scenes, she was unraveling. And I was ready to end it. I had been holding on to one final clip, the most damning of all. It wasn't just another kiss. This time, it was more intimate, more personal. A moment caught when they thought no one was watching. Laura and Josh were behind the set, standing too close, their bodies pressed together. They weren't just sneaking a kiss this time, they were in each other's arms, laughing softly, completely oblivious to the world around them. This wasn't something she could explain away. There was no denying it now. I edited the clip into our latest video, another simple recipe, a family favorite that our followers had requested. I made sure the scandalous footage was spliced in between cheerful moments of Laura cooking like nothing was wrong. It was subtle at first, a quick glimpse here, a lingering touch there. Then, right in the middle of the video, I inserted the shot of them embracing. It was impossible to miss. The whole world would see it now. I scheduled the video to go live, knowing full well what would happen next. Laura, unaware, went about her day, still trying to repair the damage from the previous videos. She spent hours on the phone, talking to sponsors, doing damage control with our PR team, and pleading with followers on social media to give her a chance to explain. But there was nothing left to explain. When the video went live, the fallout was immediate. Within minutes, the comments exploded. "Okay, this is proof. She's definitely cheating. Mike, you deserve better. How could she do this to you? I'm done with this channel. Unsubscribed." The internet was ruthless. They tore her apart, digging through every past video and every Instagram post, looking for signs they might have missed. Fans turned into detectives, finding patterns in her behavior, moments where she had been too close to Josh. It was a feeding frenzy, and Laura was the prey. She didn't even notice the video at first. She was in the middle of filming another recipe when her phone started blowing up. I saw her glance at it, her face turning pale as she realized what was happening. She stopped mid-sentence, staring at the screen in disbelief. Mike, what did you do? Her voice cracked as she looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. I shrugged, playing dumb. What do you mean? This video. They're saying. She trailed off, her hand trembling as she held her phone. They're saying I cheated. That they can see it. How did this happen? I leaned back in my chair, finally dropping the mask I'd been wearing for weeks. Maybe you should watch it for yourself. She did, and when she saw the clip, the one I had deliberately planted, her face fell. It was over. There was no way she could deny what everyone had just seen. She couldn't look me in the eye. Couldn't say a word. For the first time, Laura was completely speechless. The days that followed were a blur of chaos. Laura tried to salvage what little remained of our blog, but it was a losing battle. The scandal had taken over, and no amount of apologies or explanations could stop it. People didn't want to hear her side, they wanted drama, and they got it in full. Every video we posted after that was flooded with comments about the affair. People who had once adored Laura now despised her. I can't believe I ever supported her. She's fake. I knew something was off. Good riddance. Mike deserves better. The pressure became unbearable. Laura couldn't handle the constant scrutiny, the hate, the endless judgment. She stopped filming altogether, retreating from the spotlight that she had once thrived in. I watched her break down more than once, crying in the kitchen where we used to film, her phone buzzing with notifications she no longer wanted to read. Our sponsors officially cut ties with us. They didn't want to be associated with a scandal, and I couldn't blame them. The blog, once a thriving business that brought us both success and stability, was now a liability. Our income disappeared almost overnight. But that was the least of Laura's problems. Her reputation was shattered beyond repair. No one wanted to work with her, and the followers she had worked so hard to build had turned on her. She tried to make a few comeback attempts, posting heartfelt apologies, claiming she had made a mistake and that she was still the same person her fans had loved. But it was too late. The internet is unforgiving, and they have already made up their minds. As for Josh, he disappeared as quickly as he had arrived. He became just another casualty of the scandal, his own photography career taking a nosedive. No one wanted to hire the guy who had an affair with his client. He quietly faded from the scene, leaving Laura to face the wreckage on her own. And me? I walked away. There was nothing left for me here. The blog had been destroyed, our marriage was in ruins, and Laura had finally paid the price for her betrayal. I didn't need to say anything else. My revenge had been served in the most public, humiliating way possible, and now, I was free. I packed my things and left that night, leaving Laura sitting alone in the wreckage of the life we had built together. She had lost everything, and I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. She had done this to herself. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange sense of peace. The chapter of my life with Laura was over. The storm had passed, and I had walked away without looking back. Leaving Laura behind should have felt more final. I had spent weeks planning my revenge, watching it unfold exactly as I wanted. But as I drove away from our house that night, my mind was clouded with something I hadn't expected: emptiness. I had always imagined that after everything crumbled for Laura, I'd feel satisfied. Maybe even victorious. But instead, there was just silence. It wasn't that I regretted what I'd done. She had betrayed me, and I made sure she paid for it. But now that the blog was gone, our relationship was over, and her reputation lay in ruins, I couldn't help but wonder, what was next? The blog had been our life for years. Everything I did was tied to it, to her. And now that both were gone, I realized just how deeply my identity had been wrapped up in that world. I was free, sure. But from what? The career I had built was gone too. I had walked away from our shared success, but in doing so, I had also walked away from something I had once loved: creating, cooking, and sharing that passion with the world. It took me a while to accept that. For weeks, I stayed quiet, laying low in a small apartment I rented on the outskirts of town. I didn't post anything online. I didn't try to reach out to sponsors or rebuild my name. I didn't even cook. I just existed, wondering if my life was supposed to feel this empty. Meanwhile, the world moved on. Laura, who once commanded so much attention, faded from the headlines. People found new scandals to follow, and new dramas to obsess over. Our blog was old news, just another internet casualty. Laura tried a few times to start over, creating new accounts under different names, and posting content that looked suspiciously familiar to what we had built together. But it never lasted. Her name was still toxic, and every time she tried to start fresh, someone would recognize her and remind the world of what had happened. Josh was even more of a ghost. He had vanished completely. It was as if he never existed, wiped from the digital landscape. Not that I cared. He was always a small part of the bigger picture, just another tool in Laura's betrayal. Months passed, and eventually, I realized that I couldn't stay in limbo forever. If I was going to truly move on, I had to start rebuilding. The only question was, what did I want to rebuild? It was early morning when I finally stepped back into the kitchen with purpose. Not the small, impersonal apartment kitchen I had been using, but a space I'd rented just for myself. A professional kitchen, outfitted with everything I could possibly need. It was quiet and peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control. I had been away from the culinary world for too long, and I missed it. Cooking had always been more than just a job, it was my passion. Before the blog, before the chaos with Laura, it had been something pure, something that made me feel alive. Now, I wanted to get back to that. But this time, things would be different. I wasn't going to chase fame or followers. I didn't care about sponsorships or social media metrics. What I wanted was something real, something for myself. So, I started cooking again, not for an audience but for me. I spent hours in that kitchen, trying out old recipes, experimenting with new ones, and feeling the rhythm of it all come back to me. It was therapeutic in a way I hadn't expected. Eventually, I began to think about starting something new. Not a blog this time, but a small, local business. Something quiet, something under the radar. A place where people could come for the food, not the drama. I wanted to create an experience that wasn't about selling a personality or a lifestyle. It was just about the food. I opened a small pop-up restaurant, something intimate and low-key, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was doing something that mattered again. The community responded well. People loved the simplicity of it, and the focus on quality over flash. I wasn't chasing fame anymore, but somehow, word spread. People appreciated that there were no gimmicks, no facade. Just good food. I kept my name off the business, wanting to distance myself from the past as much as possible. I didn't need anyone connecting me to the blog, or worse, to Laura. This was mine, separate from everything that had come before. And it worked. I found peace in the routine of it all, preparing meals, serving customers, and seeing the genuine enjoyment on their faces. It reminded me of why I had fallen in love with cooking in the first place. This was the life I should have been building all along, without the distractions, and without the need for constant validation from the outside world. As the restaurant grew, I finally began to feel like I had put the past behind me. Laura's betrayal, the public humiliation, the blog, it all felt like a different life now. Something that had happened to someone else. I had moved on and found my own path, and I didn't need anyone else's approval to do it. For the first time in a long time, I felt content. Just as things seemed to settle into this peaceful rhythm, the past found a way to creep back in. It started subtly. A couple of new customers asking questions, their faces vaguely familiar. At first, I brushed it off, assuming they were just curious foodies or locals. But one day, a woman at the counter looked at me with recognition in her eyes. "Aren't you Mike from that cooking blog?" she asked, her voice a little too loud for my liking. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard anyone mention the blog in months. I looked up from the counter, forcing a polite smile. "Not anymore," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "That was a long time ago." Her eyes widened as if she had struck gold. "I knew it. I used to follow you and Laura." "Wow, I can't believe this. What happened? You guys just disappeared." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, the old resentment bubbling up. I could see other customers starting to listen in, curious about the conversation. I had worked so hard to escape that life, to build something new, but here it was again, chasing me down. "Things changed," I replied, keeping it vague. "I'm focusing on new things now." She didn't seem satisfied with the answer. "What about Laura? Is she still cooking? I heard some rumors, but, wow, this is crazy." Before I could respond, she started talking about how much she used to love our videos, and how she'd tried our recipes for her family. She kept going, but my mind was already drifting. Back to the chaos Laura had caused, back to the mess I had escaped. The last thing I needed was for people to start digging into that again. I didn't want to be Mike from the blog anymore. I just wanted to be Mike, the chef, the guy who had built something real and honest. After the woman left, I stood behind the counter, staring blankly at the dishes in front of me. That conversation had triggered something I wasn't ready to face. No matter how far I'd come, the shadow of the past was always there. Lurking. I didn't sleep much that night, thinking about the blog, about Laura. I hadn't checked in on her in months, and I didn't want to start now. But the curiosity gnawed at me. Where was she? What had become of her life after everything? Against my better judgment, I pulled out my phone and typed her name into the search bar. It didn't take long to find her. She had tried, really tried, to start over. But her attempts at rebuilding her reputation had all failed. Every new project was tainted by the scandal. And every post was flooded with comments reminding the world of what had happened. She had been relegated to the shadows, a forgotten name in the world of online influencers. A part of me should have felt vindicated. After all, this was exactly what I wanted, to see her fall, to watch her lose everything. But as I scrolled through her struggling social media accounts, I didn't feel triumph. I felt nothing. It was all over now. There was no satisfaction left in watching her suffer. It was just sad. I put the phone down, turning off the light. Tomorrow, I will focus on the restaurant again. That's what mattered. Not Laura. Not the blog. Just me. I was in the middle of prepping for the dinner rush when the bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up right away, too focused on chopping vegetables. But when I did, I froze. Laura stood at the entrance of the restaurant, her eyes scanning the room before landing on me. She looked different, tired, worn out, like someone who had been through the ringer and barely made it out. Her once polished appearance was replaced by a more casual, almost desperate look. Her hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Neither of us moved. I didn't know what to say, and from the look on her face, neither did she. Finally, she spoke. "Mike." I set the knife down, wiping my hands on a towel. "What are you doing here?" She shifted uncomfortably, glancing around the room before looking back at me. I didn't know where else to go. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You've got to be kidding me." "I'm not," she said softly. I needed to see you." The anger I thought I had buried came rushing back. "Why? So you can try to explain yourself again?" "Because I don't think there's anything left to say, Laura." She took a few steps forward, her voice cracking. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I've lost everything, Mike. The blog, the sponsors, everything is gone. And it's my fault, I know that. She paused, her eyes welling up with tears. "I don't know what to do anymore." For a moment, I felt a pang of pity. She really had lost everything. But then I remembered why. She had made her choices, and those choices had destroyed both of our lives. I wasn't going to let her drag me back into her mess. "You're right," I said, my voice cold. "It is your fault." She winced but didn't argue. "I spent years building that blog with you," I continued. "And you threw it all away for some fling with Josh. And now you want what? Sympathy? A second chance? You don't get that, Laura. Not from me." Her tears spilled over, but I didn't care. I couldn't. I had moved on, or at least, I was trying to. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know what else to do." For a moment, the silence hung heavy between us. I could feel the weight of her desperation, but I wasn't going to be the one to save her. "Not this time. You'll figure it out," I said, my tone final. Just like I had to. Laura nodded slowly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I guess I deserved that." Without another word, she turned and walked out of the restaurant, the bell chiming as the door closed behind her. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where she had stood, my heart pounding in my chest. She was gone, and this time, it really felt final. I went back to my prep work, but my hands were shaking. After Laura's unexpected visit, something shifted inside me. As much as I wanted to brush it off, to tell myself that her problems weren't mine anymore, the encounter left a mark. Her hollow eyes, the defeat in her voice, it was hard to shake. I had spent so long plotting her downfall, making sure she felt the pain of betrayal as deeply as I had. But seeing her in that state, I wasn't sure if I still had the stomach for it. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the restaurant, trying to push Laura from my mind. Business was steady, and I had a loyal customer base who appreciated my work. Yet, every time the bell rang, I found myself glancing at the door, half expecting to see her walk back in. It never happened, but the thought gnawed at me. I kept replaying our last conversation, questioning my reaction. Maybe I had been too harsh, maybe not harsh enough. But no matter how much I analyzed it, one thing became clear. There was still unfinished business between us. Laura's visit wasn't just about her looking for sympathy. It was something more, something unresolved. One evening, I decided to check up on her again. Against my better judgment, I searched for her online, scrolling through her dormant social media profiles. There have been no updates since the scandal. No new projects, no attempts at a comeback. It was like she had vanished completely. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from an old friend from the blogging days. One of the few people who had stuck around after everything went south. The message was short. "Hey, heard about Laura. You okay?" I stared at the text, wondering what they were referring to. Did they know about her visit to the restaurant? Or was it something else? I hesitated before responding, deciding not to ask for details. I didn't want to open that door again. But the message lingered in my mind. Later that night, when the restaurant had closed and the kitchen was quiet, I found myself sitting at the counter, nursing a drink. The room was dim, the only light coming from the street outside. I thought about Laura, about how our lives had once been so intertwined. We had built something together, even if it had been torn apart in the end. Maybe that's why I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. I picked up my phone again and hesitated before dialing her number. I wasn't sure what I would say, or if she would even answer. But as the phone rang, I realized there was something I needed to know. To my surprise, Laura picked up on the third ring. Her voice was quiet, cautious. "Mike?" There was an awkward pause as I tried to gather my thoughts. "Hey, I wasn't expecting you to answer." She let out a soft, humorless laugh. "I wasn't expecting you to call." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "I've been thinking about our last conversation. About what you said. I'm sorry if I..." "Stop," I interrupted. "I'm not calling for an apology. I want to understand." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Laura's breath catch like she was struggling to find the right words. Finally, she spoke. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said, her voice shaking. "When it started with Josh, I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I wasn't thinking about you, or the blog, or any of it. It just happened." "Just happened?" I repeated, my frustration rising. "You don't accidentally destroy a marriage, Laura." "I know," she said quickly. "I know. But it wasn't about you. It was never about you. I was lost. I was overwhelmed with everything, the blog, the pressure, the constant need to be perfect. And Josh, he was just an escape. A way to forget about everything, even if it was only for a moment." I clenched my jaw, anger bubbling up again. "And what about me? Was I just supposed to be collateral damage?" "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I never wanted to hurt you. But by the time I realized what I was doing, it was too late. I couldn't stop it. And then you found out, and everything spiraled out of control." I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, I'd say things spiraled." There was another long pause, and I could hear her trying to hold back tears. "Mike," she said finally, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to understand. But I need you to know that I didn't want this. I didn't want any of it." I rubbed my temples, feeling the weight of her words sink in. I had spent so long blaming her, hating her for what she'd done, that I hadn't stopped to consider that maybe she was just as lost as I was. Maybe she had been broken in her own way, even before Josh entered the picture. "Why now?" I asked, my voice softer. "Why come back here after all this time?" "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted. "I've lost everything. The blog, my reputation, my career. I don't know who I am without it." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on my own pain that I hadn't considered how much she had lost too. We had both been consumed by the blog, by the world we created together. And when it fell apart, it wasn't just our relationship that shattered, it was our entire lives. "I don't know what you want from me, Laura," I said quietly. "I don't know if there's anything left between us to fix. I'm not asking for us to go back," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "I just wanted you to know the truth. To hear it from me." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the betrayal that had defined the last year of my life. But another part of me, one that I hadn't acknowledged until now, wanted closure. I needed to understand if only to move on. "I don't hate you," I said finally, surprising even myself. I thought I did, but I don't. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear Laura exhale softly as if she had been holding her breath. "Thank you," she whispered. We stayed on the phone for a few more minutes, neither of us knowing exactly what to say. But for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like the beginning of something new, an ending, maybe, but one that I could live with. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said as we ended the call. "I hope you do too, Mike." And with that, the call ended, leaving me alone in the quiet kitchen. But this time, the quiet didn't feel so empty. For the first time in months, it felt like a step towards something better. The weeks after my conversation with Laura felt like a blur of emotions I wasn't entirely prepared to handle. It was as if the anger, the frustration, and the need for revenge had been holding me together for so long that when I finally let them go, I was left exposed. I hadn't realized how deeply the pain had defined me, how much of my identity had been shaped by the betrayal. But now, for the first time, I felt something close to peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from forgetting. No, I would never forget what had happened, but the kind of peace that comes from acceptance. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the mistakes Laura had made, nor could I erase the mistakes I had made in the aftermath. All I could do was decide how to move forward. The restaurant had become my sanctuary in this process. Each day, I poured myself into the work, preparing meals, connecting with customers, and creating a space that was completely my own. It wasn't about fame or followers anymore, it was about doing what I loved, on my own terms. And that was enough. One evening, after a particularly busy dinner service, I found myself sitting at one of the small tables near the window, watching the last of the customers filter out into the night. The glow from the streetlights cast long shadows across the room, and the hum of the city outside was a comforting backdrop to my thoughts. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old photos of the blog, back when things were simpler, back when Laura and I were still a team. The photos of us smiling together, cooking side by side, felt like they belonged to a different life. A different version of me. I had been proud of what we'd built, even if it had all come crashing down in the end. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, I didn't feel the need to delete those memories. They were part of my story, just as much as the restaurant I now called my own. I had learned something from that time, about myself, about Laura, about what I truly valued. And maybe that was the real lesson here. The blog had been the foundation, but it didn't define me. I could build something new, something better, without losing sight of the person I wanted to become. I glanced at my phone, noticing a message from one of the regulars at the restaurant. "Mike, amazing meal tonight. You got a real gift. Looking forward to the next one." I smiled at the message, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with recognition or validation. It was about the connection I had made with these people, the genuine enjoyment they found in my food, in the experience I had created. This was what mattered now, real relationships, real moments, not the curated, artificial world I had left behind. As I sat there, the thought of Laura drifted into my mind again, but this time, it didn't sting. I wondered what she was doing now, how she was coping with everything that had happened. Part of me hoped she had found some way to rebuild, just as I had. Despite everything, I didn't want her to be stuck in the past, trapped by her own mistakes. Maybe she would find peace, maybe she wouldn't. That was her journey, not mine. I finished my drink, stood up, and took a long look around the restaurant. This was my world now, a world I had built on my own, one meal, one moment at a time. It was enough, and that realization, as simple as it was, felt like the closure I had been searching for all along. As I locked up the restaurant and stepped into the cool night air, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last year finally lift from my shoulders. I had let go of the past. And for the first time, I was ready to step into whatever came next. Whatever the future held, I knew one thing for sure: I was free. And that, more than anything, was the real victory. The day after I let go of Laura and the past, I woke up feeling different. The restaurant had become a symbol of everything I had built for myself, away from the mess of the blog, away from the betrayal. And now it was time to take that to the next level. There was something liberating in knowing that the ghosts of my old life no longer held me captive. I had finally made peace with it all. That morning, as I walked into the restaurant before opening, I had an idea, one that had been slowly forming in the back of my mind. For months, I had worked to create a safe haven, a place that represented me. But now, I wanted to make it more than just a restaurant. I wanted to share stories. Not through videos, not through curated content that catered to clicks and likes, but through something real. I sat down at the counter with a notebook, letting my thoughts pour out. What if I turned the restaurant into more than just a place to eat? What if I created an experience where people could come, not just for food, but for connection, for a deeper understanding of where their meal came from, and the stories behind each dish? A return to storytelling, but in a way that honored authenticity, something I had lost when the blog became more about image than substance. I scribbled ideas furiously, inspired by the thought of hosting small events, live cooking classes and intimate dinners where guests could learn about the ingredients, the techniques, and the history behind the meals I created. No scripts, no staged moments, just me doing what I loved and inviting people into that world. It would be a way to use what I had learned from the blogging days but stripped of the pressure, the fakeness, and the drama. As I planned, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. This was the future, my future. And it was rooted in who I was, not who I had been. Later that week, I hosted the first of these small, intimate dinners. A few of my regulars were there, along with some new faces. All curious about what this experience was going to be. The atmosphere was warm, the kitchen open for everyone to see as I prepared each dish with care, talking them through the process, and sharing the stories behind the recipes. The laughter, the conversation, the shared appreciation for the food, it was everything I had imagined. As the evening came to a close, one of the guests, a young couple who had recently moved to the area, approached me. "This was amazing, Mike," the woman said, smiling warmly. "We've never experienced anything like this." It felt personal. "That's exactly what I was going for," I replied, feeling a surge of pride. "Thank you for being part of it." They left with a promise to return, and as I cleaned up the kitchen, I realized this was what I had been searching for all along. Not fame, not recognition, but a real connection with people through the food I loved to create. It was a simple, honest kind of success, one that wasn't measured by views or subscribers, but by the faces of the people who left feeling like they had experienced something special. As I locked up for the night, I stepped outside and breathed in the crisp evening air. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about the past or what I had lost. I was thinking about the future, about what I could build with my own hands and my own passion. A notification buzzed on my phone, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Laura. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect. But then I opened it. "Mike, I just wanted to say thank you for everything. I'm trying to figure things out, and I think I've finally started to understand. I wish you the best, truly. I hope you find happiness. You deserve it." I stared at the message for a few moments, feeling a strange mix of emotions. This wasn't closure in the traditional sense, but it was something close. Laura was moving on, just as I was, and at that moment, I realized I no longer needed anything from her. I had my own life now, my own story to tell. I typed a quick reply. "Thank you, Laura. I wish you the best too." With that, I slid my phone back into my pocket, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next morning, I arrived at the restaurant early, ready to prepare for another full day. But this time, it wasn't just a day like any other. This was a new beginning, a chapter I had written for myself, free of the weight of the past. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the smell of fresh ingredients greeting me. The kitchen was waiting, the space filled with potential. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly ready for whatever came next.